We've all seen it. The odd look in their eyes, seemingly lost and out of touch with reality. The lack of sense a lot of them seem to make when spoken to at times, and more importantly, the passion they might bear for a specific topic, whether it be a strong religious belief or the fact that they think they've been surveilled by someone, as if they were in the Truman Show. Cults, while not uncommon, sadly, are still so shocking to many of us, and so many of us can't fathom the idea that someone could somehow find themselves at such a vulnerable state as to believe the nonsense they're being basically served on a silver spoon. But the way that cults operate make it actually much more easier than we think to fall victims to one. You too might find yourself spewing absolute BS like it's an absolute fact of life and not really even realize it before it's far too late. If anyone has learned anything from events we've seen from the likes of Charles Manson or even the Capitol attacks in the States, both of these very different yet so similar examples hold very strong fundamentals that make it so easy to see just how pretty much anybody could fall victim to this, regardless of circumstance or even background. The idea of a cult is usually much more dramatized, but not every cult is as outwardly out in the open as they may seem. Humans and their biology tend to seek out forms of what is known to us as tribalism. We seek people who understand us, who make us feel welcome and at home. But more importantly, people we feel we can connect on a matter of days and build a community with. It's within our core needs as social beings, and that aspect is the most important for a cult to be operational and for their leaders to get the devotion they need in order for said cult to be functional as intended. Often the methods of achieving such extremes tend to be quite simple. Find someone who might feel a little alone, a little bit vulnerable, who might be alienated in some ways, or somebody who's just seeking a form of stability and comfort. This can be just about any human connections, but it can also be about money, status, or even power. Once the person is identified to feel this way, the cult will usually start by making small gestures, which assures the person that their intentions are good. That's how they build trust, and they make it hard for that trust to be dismissed once things start to get a little out of hand, because the initial bond has already been established. Usually once the person has been surrounded by the cult members for a bit, the bonds start to form, which only reinforce the feeling of belonging and make this vulnerable person feel far less vulnerable and alone. Or if the person seeks wealth, for example, they might be given a position which might in some way appeal to that sense of seeking wealth, and that gives them an incentive to stay. By that point, the bonds start to become more and more solid, creating friendships, and this is usually where the really heavy indoctrination starts to play. Now, realistically, if the cult in question was not to bring, let's say, any value to the members, they wouldn't really stay afloat, as well, most people would pretty much up and leave. And most cult leaders tend to know that. Most people in these leader positions tend to be smart enough individuals with a strong enough sense of charisma or an ease at convincing others to do their dirty work. So, with heavy manipulation, they get away with this by making themselves up to be the coaches or the teachers of the cult. Usually, most members tend to fall for it, and they look to them for a form of guidance, which can very quickly turn very dangerous.
Great examples of these characters can be seen in the charisma of Charles Manson. For example, it allowed him to control his Mansonite cults and lead people to kill in his place in order to achieve status and power in society. The intelligent persona of Keith Raniere, which led the cult of NXIVM to believe that they were seeking out higher education and became much wiser by being in his presence, which then allowed Keith to manipulate, assault, and even brand groups of women in his order. The religious authority, the cult of the Solar Temple, led by Luke Jarrett, had in the eyes of very religious individuals who wanted to assure themselves a place in a higher spiritual plane.
All these cults had something to offer their members, no matter how untruthful it may have been. There was always a promise of something out there being better for everyone. This very concept is how the best cult leaders manage to get a cult following, by promising a better future for those who follow them.
Make America great again. Remember the time when Americans had decent jobs, made good wages? We were the country selling the most good produce right here, and more importantly, immigrants weren't so prevalent and so entitled to take our place and steal our jobs.
Almost as important as a promise for a better future, the promise of a worse one if you deny to follow the orders. Fear. The easiest way to get someone to listen to you after the countless services you've done for them have failed and the mask starts to fall also slightly off. See, a good cult isn't a nice one. That just wouldn't work. After about the second or the third time you've been asked to do something that's so out of character of what you up till now was usually asked of, the cult slowly starts to up the ante after every event, and you start to come to the conclusions of, well, what's really happening here? What do you do as a cult leader if you still have to reel in the reins of your servants? Well, you scare them.
Where you gonna go run off to? You're crazy. You really think your parents who you've scared off, your friends who you've scared off, and everyone around you that isn't us is gonna want you around them?
Also known as the typical abusive boyfriend-girlfriend tactic, but typically, there's a reason these people tend to go to this, because as much as I hate to say it, it kinda works when you're trying to impose a sense of alienation and fear in the person, because the fear of isolation, basically being one of the many fears you could probably be threatened with, will solidify your rank in the cult and make it that much harder for you to leave, because like any good mob boss,
if you leave now, there's got to be some consequences, right?
Mid-1967 America would come to face a frenzy unlike what they'd seen in a while. Nationwide panic as Charles Manson is linked to the murder of famous movie director Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate. For months, everyone wanted to know what exactly made it so that these people would want to follow a man that seemed so deranged. These people were so loyal to Manson that they were even committing crimes after his arrest. Some victims of the cults later came out and claimed terrible things had been done to them when in the presence of Manson, yet so many of his followers refused to speak ill of him. We would see the same pattern repeat again in 1984, just a few decades later, with the Order of the Solar Temple making headlines for odd self-killings around different continents, all being performed at the same time. Some even being high prominent figures in the political and even CEOs of companies being tracked back to being members of the cult, and as such, taking their own lives for it. Once again, they proved that even after the cult was denounced for terrible practices, they couldn't stop their own brainwashing into thinking it was still what was best for them, as the events would repeat themselves not too long after with a new set of people. And just when we thought that maybe cults weren't as prominent as they once were, here we were in 2018 when the cult of Nexium was exposed for being a terrible cult that would target A-listers, mainly harboring celebrities as their followers. Again, many of these followers remain immensely loyal to their leader, Keith Reiner, even long after he was sentenced to 120 years in prison. Now initially, when someone mentions a cult, they may picture people wearing robes, worshipping some type of object, or performing a human sacrifice. But a cult can have many meanings other than that. There's a specific group that's still shrouded in mystery that I feel could be categorized as a cult. It is the supposed elites that surround Jeffrey Epstein. For those that don't know, Jeffrey Epstein was a successful American financier and became extremely wealthy. He would target young girls aged from 13 to 15 and would use his charisma and fortune to lure them under his wing. Unfortunately, the girls were led to Jeffrey Epstein's private island, where they were all treated unkindly and as playthings apparently by Hollywood elites and powerful political figures. It is said that Jeffrey would keep these young girls trapped on his private island and would throw parties where these supposed Hollywood stars and political figures would visit the island and unfortunately do inhumane things to these young girls. No one knows who these Hollywood and political figures are. However, one victim by the name of Virginia Roberts said she was ordered to give the prince whatever he required. The prince she's referring to is Prince Andrew, the Duke of York and the son of Queen Elizabeth. The prince denied all allegations and even denied meeting Virginia. However, a photo later leaked of the prince holding Virginia by her hip. This photo, taken in 2001, he then states that the photo was edited. However, he does acknowledge that he was a very good friend with Jeffrey Epstein and even called Epstein a good friend, ignoring the fact that Jeffrey Epstein is a monster.
So this was my video for this week. I hope you guys appreciated the video, enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section when you thought, if you want to see a specific kind of topic from me or anything. A massive thank you to ft.CrypticJay, who collaborated with me on this video, as you could tell. No, the masculine voice was not me, but definitely if you want to watch any kind of similar content, also very horror related, really cool stuff by the way, definitely check out his channel. I'm going to leave everything in the description so you can find him if you want to look into it. I definitely recommend. He should have a video up, if not at the same time that I'm posting this one, sometime recently, so definitely keep up with that. A massive thank you to everybody who subscribed recently. It definitely means a lot. But yeah, other than that, I'll leave all my links as usual in the description bar. Any music I've used in the video, any of my links to my other social media in case anybody wants to follow me, all will be in the description. But until then, I will be seeing you guys in the next one.